Well, hello. Thank you once again for visiting with me again. My name is Terrence Roselle. I'm a master's level therapist, and today's topic is going to cover healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries are extremely important to us human beings because they help us maintain self-care, self-love, and just take overall health, mental health, and taking care of ourselves. I want to help you understand this by using a scenario, something familiar that you might remember. Have you ever had the experience of being somewhere, maybe you were drinking a cup of coffee, waiting for the bus, or just standing waiting, and someone came up to you and began talking to you? And they began to tell you things that were very intimate, a lot of information, things that you just don't tell people who you've just met or haven't met before. They're telling you about their crazy children. They're telling you about their sexual dysfunctions with their lover, with their wife. They're just spilling all these information about their personal life and all their mistakes and the things that they've done. And you begin to start feeling uncomfortable inside. And do you know what that feeling is? That feeling is your internal boundaries telling you that this is too much information. And so that you have just met a person. When you have the experience, you have just met a person with extremely skewed boundaries. And so we're going to discuss that, and we're going to learn and talk about how to even gain boundaries if we lack them. So first, how do you get skewed boundaries? How do our boundaries get offset? Well, first, we found that boundaries are taught. We learn boundaries at a very young age by the rules that we're given. So a lot of times, if our parents did not teach us boundaries, or if their boundaries themselves were very skewed, then boundaries will become extremely skewed. For example, my mother used to make us go to bed at certain times, where other parents may have let their kids stay up all night, or hang out with adult children, or engage in activities that are for adults. Well, that will skew a child's boundaries. Some will let their children drink alcohol. I've even seen it where a man was letting his small daughter drive him around in his vehicle, and he was arrested for it. So these can be very skewed boundaries where we allow our children to engage in activities that really are meant for when they're reached adulthood. Another thing is we can begin skewed boundaries by experiencing sexual abuse or sexual trauma. Many times when we've experienced things like this, it really offsets and distorts our boundaries and our understanding of our boundaries. For example, a person with skewed boundaries may either become intimate with everybody or become intimate with nobody. Either extreme in any direction is an indication of skewed boundaries. So another point is that a person experiencing sexual abuse can have skewed boundaries that misinterpret what people are saying. They can misinterpret something that's healthy for something that's unhealthy. For example, in black culture, older black women or elderly black women are known for using the terms of endearment of honey, baby, sweetheart. Honey, how you doing, baby? Are you okay, honey? And they will use these terms. Of course, there's no hint of of anything sexual in this, but the person who has extremely skewed boundaries may misinterpret them as sexual. And I have actually seen this take place where a person, and all I just said to the person, called them honey, and they literally flipped out. Well, what happened? Well, what they did is they misread the healthy use of the word honey and baby, use of these words when people were trying to seduce them or take advantage of them sexually. So our boundaries can cause us to really misread people's behavior, misread behavior for bad behavior and bad behavior for good behavior, which can really negatively affect our relationships. Now, there are two types of boundaries we're going to look at. And these are levels of boundaries. There are external boundaries, and then there are internal boundaries. The external boundaries are the boundaries used to develop internal boundaries. These are the rules, the guidelines, which help us to create and formulate internal boundaries. For example, when our parents taught us to knock on the door before we entered, or taught us to ask permission before we take something, these are boundaries that help us to respect the boundaries of others. And then we develop internal boundaries, which is inside of us, which are the same boundaries that in the scenario where the person began to feel uncomfortable. Those are the internal boundaries that simply let us know when something is permissible and something isn't permissible. And we call those internal boundaries. Now, boundaries will differ depending on the level or type of relationship that we're in. For example, when we're dealing with our mother, we have certain boundaries. When we're dealing with our brother, we have certain boundaries. When we're dealing with our sister, we have a certain set of boundaries. When we're dealing with our employers, we have a certain set of boundaries. Now, for example, I may get undressed in front of my brother, but I probably will not get undressed in front of my sister. There's certain boundaries there that just, my internal boundaries that just say, oh, that just doesn't feel right. So there's certain boundaries. There's boundaries of how we treat our sons, and there's boundaries on the way we treat our daughters. There's things that we would do with our sons that we probably would not do with our daughters. So there's certain boundaries. There's things that, different boundaries in every situation. Now, of course, you can think of what happens when people distort these boundaries. When, like in sexual abuse, when a father distorts the boundary, he will engage in activities with a child or a daughter that you would not do with the other daughter. There's just a different set of boundaries for that. And sometimes these boundaries will become tremendously distorted and need to be reset. So your boundaries will differ based on the type of relationship or style of relationship that you're engaging in at the time. For example, you may get to see a woman or a man and know them and not know them that well. And there may be certain boundaries in that stage of the relationship. However, as you get to know each other, as you begin to trust each other, as you begin to develop a relationship, those boundaries may change. You may become intimate with each other. So you wouldn't do that when you first met them, but those boundaries can change. So remember, these internal boundaries are really needed to show us how to function and act in given relationships. And boundaries basically reveal themselves in the function and operation of our interpersonal relationships. So the good news is this, that boundaries can be reset and relearned, and we're going to discuss exactly how to do that. So remember also that boundaries, application of skewed boundaries, or when we go to extremes in either direction. Okay, it's an example of skewed boundaries. Now, boundaries are evident in the operation of intimate and personal relationships. Now, for example, you have an indication of skewed boundaries if you are